grove of Janala maples or Amur maples, again, on the invasive species list, but we bought them from a nursery 42 years ago and they were recommended for fall color. My husband pruned them into this glorious shape of sort of an oriental flavor with our dry creek bed going through them. Well, either the fact that they are just not a terribly long-lived tree, or the fact that my neighbor 2 doors down had a giant cottonwood tree that eventually shaded this grove so much, we think the trees are weakened. Not sure why. My neighbor, lovely neighbor, has since taken down the cottonwood, which we're glad about, but these trees are going. So I have this perfectly developed hosta glade that I think is just lovely, and all of a sudden the source of shade is going. So last year my husband and I went and did some research and selected 2 different varieties of maples. The 2 varieties always a good idea in case one isn't quite as hardy as you think it's going to be. You can fall back on the other. And we've trimmed areas as much as we can, and we have the young trees starting to grow in the old grove. And some of them get plenty of sun. You have to remember maples like sun. There's 6 new starts in here. So we'll have my son come out with his chainsaw and maybe take out a few upper limbs. And we'll work that balance between trying to keep shade from the old maples going long enough that it'll take several years before these maples get of size to provide shade. So we'll just have to play it by ear. We'll just have to evaluate each year and say, where do I need to take some limbs out and what can we leave to provide the shade? And I've converted the far side. We'll walk over there, but I've converted the far side to more sun simply because there is no shade anymore over there. So that's where the peonies and the Siberian iris and the grasses are taking over because we simply do not have shade over there. Been working on redeveloping this grove. It's really important to think ahead. You can't just wake up one day and go, oh, these trees are dying. I think I'll put another tree in, because it's probably going to be 10 years before these new maples really do the job of shading. So in addition to getting them started and trying to prolong the old, we've moved some things back here. Ferns, trillium. I wish you could have seen my trillium this May. They were glorious. We've brought them back here in the shelter of the arborvitaes because we know that there's no way that it's going to be hospitable for them for a long time to come. And I'm really proud of my white Siberian iris, which is an unusual cultivar, and even from my house I can see it from my kitchen patio door. It just pops white, one of my favorite garden colors. Full sun plants that we put out here. And yet somehow this, I think that's a Francie hosta, just an old standard. Some of those hostas that have been here for 40 years seem to have a root system that allows them to flourish even though they get more sun than is ideal. I have to like a plant when it's in bloom and when it's not in bloom. You know, anyone can look at the beautiful white blooms and say, oh, of course, that's a plant that you would plant. But the form of the plant is so lovely and so different that I think it's lovely even when it's not in bloom. So that's my bar. I have to like it in and out of season. Yeah, these are 35-year-old Vigelia and with silver lamium in front of them. And I like edges. We like white. It pops in a garden. So the lamium, to me, I'm trying to get it to continue over here where it's really shady. It's a challenge. But these are older plants. I am pretty aggressive. When I do prune the Weigela back, I try to prune about 25% of it all the way back to the ground every year as a form of rejuvenation pruning. And for that reason, I think this is a pretty lovely specimen for a shrub as old as it is. Now, these are unique hydrangeas. And as you see where they were planted, these were way smaller. The arborvitae were way smaller. We thought we had plenty of room 40 years ago, and now you can see that the plants are just growing like an arc and reaching for the sun. But instead of taking them out, I'm just enjoying what bloom I get at the top, which is lovely, and it will come in the late summer, and I'm trying to fill in with more of the white lamium just as a tiered effect. So you don't always have to take things out just because they're getting older. You can just find different ways to prune them, different ways to use them, and so forth. I'm standing almost on the site of an older honey locust tree that we planted 40 years ago. But in the course of 40 years ago, my husband and I put an addition on our house. We bumped out, put a 2-bedroom and sun porch addition on our house, and all of a sudden that honey locust tree was growing branches right into the house. So we did the same thing. We decided honey locust is the perfect specimen, and we planted this one. This tree is probably 20 years old now, and so we planted it, keeping both trees as long as we possibly could, cutting original branches out of the old honey locust wherever necessary, and eventually we had to have a professional tree service come in and take down the old honey locust because it simply was interfering with this one. But as you see now, we have a lovely shade that's provided by the new one, and we really enjoy the shade of honey locust. It's filtered. It's not blackout shade, but it's a very effective shade tree. And I sometimes keep what they call sun and shade. This is just plain Karl Forster grass at 3 different levels, so it's really pretty when they come to their full height. It gets morning and early afternoon sun, but not much beyond that. So perhaps it would be even more glorious if it was in absolute full sun, but well, sometimes I cheat the margins on what they call full sun and full shade. Another ugly path through here. I have trouble keeping the oxalis out of it. We made these hosta pavers years ago, but they're all whopper jawed right now because the roots of the trees are growing to the point where it's causing the pavers to tilt. So this summer we have another place where we want to use these pavers. We're going to lift these pavers out of here. I'm probably going to use Roundup and just kill out all the oxalis, transfer out some of the golden moneywort if I want to or not, and just put mulch in here as a path. Because as the trees mature, the roots kick up, causing uneven pavement and so forth, and you just can't deny that. So rather than deny it, we're just going to go with it and put mulch down, and people can walk on a mulch path. And it's also true that gardening keeps you young. A lot of my friends will say, how can you keep up with all this? And I'll say, well, for one thing, I enjoy it, and for another thing, I would much rather be out here in nature working than in a gym somewhere. Being close to nature, I have all of my senses stimulated at the same time. The feel of the earth, the sound of the wind, the water in my several water different features, the smells and fragrances that come from my garden, and even the tasty things I get to harvest out of the vegetable garden and back. So if you think about the healing aspects of gardening, gardening is probably one of the most healthful things that you can do, and definitely helps me hide the number of decades that are inside this old body here. It keeps me young. Thanks for watching.